You are watching Co-op for Two, broadcasting live from Champaign, Illinois, Tuesday, July 19th, 2022 at around 11 p.m. If the chat could let me know if the audio and video is okay. All right, so what are we doing today? Today we're probably making a terrible mistake with ramifications that I cannot foresee. But I woke up this morning and YouTube is filled with videos about, that's not the right screen. All right, already we've got a problem. YouTube is filled with videos on Star Realms. Okay, let's just of Kickstarter paid previews for the new Star Realms Kickstarter, which is called Rise of Empire. And I've been thinking about for a while whether we need some sort of counterbalance to all of this Kickstarter hype. And so that's what we're gonna do. This may be the only video in this series, but I'm calling this Kickstarter Nope. And what will it be? Let's see if I don't mess this up. Okay, so here's my outline for Kickstarter Nope, what this is. And we're going to start, I don't mean to be picking on Star Realms, but I'm a fan of Star Realms. And this just hit today, all of these videos coordinated to release today. So I thought, okay, let's just do it. We'll do it live. We'll talk about it. And we'll see if it's worth doing more of these. So here's my outline of the purpose of this series, or at least this video. This will be for people who know they shouldn't back something, who want to be talked out of it, who want that little angel on their shoulders. There's 100 devils on your shoulders from all of the board game channels and your psychology of fear of missing out, all that. So I think there's some value, and normally your spouse would play this role, but maybe your spouse needs some additional evidence, or you don't have a spouse, so you need someone to say, just slow your roll with backing every Kickstarter. This certainly is not meant to be your only source of information about Kickstarters. This is just a little 1 to 100. One little video saying maybe you don't need to back it. And so let's just do some ground rule stuff. This first video, I'm going to ramble quite a bit about sort of background motivation for this, and then I'll get into Star Realms at the end. If we do more of these, we'll just jump right to the video. But if you're watching this later, there'll be timestamps. You can just jump to the Star Realms part. All right, so I'm not going to be bad-mouthing games. I'll rarely have anything bad to say about the actual games. They'll often be games that I feel a little itch to back, but I'm trying to talk myself out of, and so I'm going to share that with you. But the point of these videos are going to be to tell you not to back it. So that's the ground, that's the sort of ground rules here. In addition, I will only do this for games that are guaranteed to fund, that are made by big companies who have already spent tens of thousands of dollars on paid Kickstarter previews. So this is so that my videos cannot affect them in any meaningful way. All right, let's talk for a minute about the nature of Kickstarter paid previews and the board game YouTube industry, which it is now. Kickstarter, you probably know, originally started with the idea of let small groups of people or small developers, raise funding for an idea that they can't bring to market without the funding of users. It's an amazing idea, a wonderful, incredible idea. Now, what has happened is Kickstarter, although there are still occasionally people like that on Kickstarter, Kickstarter has become mainly a place for giant companies to produce high production campaigns, very carefully coordinated with advertising departments and everything, to get pre-orders for games that they already know they're going to make. So it's not funding for a project that won't otherwise get funded. It's to get huge amounts of capital right up front before they have to spend any money, and do it sometimes based on a completely finished game or an unfinished game that they've focused their energies on the commercials for it and the hype for it, and increasingly coordinated things like these paid previews, which for Star Realms, for example, all were embargoed to hit today, July 19th, the opening day. And so that's why in your video feeds you see all of these Star Realms paid previews. Now, let's talk about what a paid preview is. What is a paid preview? Well, a paid preview looks a lot like a review, but it's not a review. It's paid. The company will pay the YouTube creator to create a video about it. The company will provide early access to the game, sometimes a prototype, sometimes a near finished copy. And those copies will only be provided to channels that have large numbers of viewers and who have shown that they will give positive reviews. Now, I remember watching a Rado video. Rado makes tens of thousands, just huge numbers of videos about everything, and he's usually positive about everything anyway. But he had a little discussion of how he does his paid previews. And what he said was, well, he's not going to lie about his opinion. If he plays a game he doesn't like, he won't get on camera and say he likes it if he didn't. But that video will never air. So the company will be told, hey, you paid me $1,000 to do this Kickstarter paid preview. I didn't really like the game, so here's your money back, or here's some of the money back, or whatever. And that video will never see the light of day, or I'll never make that video. So your favorite YouTube board game channel that's making paid previews is not lying to you. They're not going to get up and say, I love this game, when they didn't. I don't think that's the risk here. But the whole incentive structure is really, really bad. And I hope we can agree this is not a healthy thing for this industry. If you're a board game channel, you are in a desperate competition for early access to games. The only way you get early access to games is if the companies think you're going to say positive things about it. If you say negative things about a game, that, let's say you were provided an early access copy and you really didn't like it, unless you're the Dice Tower, unless you're the very, very, very top echelon, and even then probably, you're not going to keep getting games from a company if you start to say bad things about those games. So even leaving aside the money of the paid preview, even if no one was getting paid at all, there's a huge incentive to have glowing positive reviews. And some of the board game channels even come out and say, hey, look, our mission in life is to say great things and, lavish praise on games. And that's sort of understandable. And you could even look at the incentive from the other end, that the market is going to find channels that are just lavish praise on games, and they will feed those and give games to those and avoid the others. So all of the incentives are messed up. And it's not a great way for board game YouTubers to be funded. I think if we agree that people are working very hard to produce good content, it would be much better if those content creators could be funded through a different mechanism. And probably the best alternative we have now is Patreon. So I do want to advocate, if you find game channels that use Patreon to support them, it would be much better for you to support the channels you like directly with Patreon and wean them off this Kickstarter preview money. And you can't blame them if that's the only source and they want to make a living out of this. You can't blame them for looking for revenue sources. But it's not the worst thing in the world, these paid previews, but it's not healthy. And I see I had a little note here about the illusory truth effect. This is just part of this idea of embargoing all these paid previews for one day. The fact that you see it over and over again, all to like today, you're being inundated with Star Realms, Rise of Empire, Star Realms, Rise of Empire. What is this amazing game? I better go get it. And so all of that stuff rubbed me a bit the wrong way. And I do think one of the things you have to do is develop a little spider sense for these paid previews. There's a little bit of history in real estate listings, how real estate agents put little subtle comments in the listings to tell other real estate agents that the seller will lower their offer or whatever. And I think you have to use a little bit of that when you read these paid previews. Like all their excitement level is going to be at a level 10 or 11. So you just have to be looking for the games that are only at the 10 level of excitement. All right, so a couple things to keep in mind here. If the series continues, but at least for today, no, I don't have any early access to these games. I don't take any early copies, Kickstarter, no paid previews, nothing, especially for these games. And they're deliberately not giving out access to these games to people who aren't getting paid previews. So I won't have access, but I'll try to watch the other Kickstarter previews videos to get some idea of the contents and the games. Again, my role here is to deliberately play devil's advocate to say you shouldn't, to argue on that side. We will look at costs and delivery dates. I'm not going to speak about whether games will hold their value. That's a totally separate question. And you might, if you really resell your games and trade them, you could approach this differently and say, is this game, if I back it, going to hold its value if I get rid of it? I'm not going to be talking about it in that perspective. I'll just be talking about, is this worth your money to play, to enjoy? If you do want to look at people who talk about games holding their value, the King of Average and Alex at Board Game Co. are both pretty good about that. And I do want to suggest you watch these other channels that do paid reviews. I believe King of Average doesn't, or for the most part doesn't. These others I've listed, Board Game Co. and Jesse at Quackalope and Brian at Game Brigade and a couple others. Watch their videos to learn about the game. Just, compensate that with someone else telling you to calm down and don't rush out to kickstart everything. And I think, I was thinking about doing this video because no one makes videos that say, hey, don't back this Kickstarter on this game. But actually, you can find that on other channels when they do their sort of crowdfunding summaries for the month or the week. So it's still very high on the side of, yeah, this is great, back it. But if you look at the roundups, like Dice Tower does roundups and Game Brigade does them as well, like looking at here's the 5 new Kickstarters, which ones should you back? Those are probably more balanced places to get opinions. And again, I'm not going to talk about the game per se. I'll just be talking about reasons not to back it. All right. We're getting to the end of my little 30 minutes of previews before we start. Just to give you my biases, though, so everything's on the table. I have backed a few dozen Kickstarters, and I've been mostly quite happy. I've come to really pull back. I do very little backing of Kickstarter now, mostly because I think the costs have gotten ridiculous. The shipping costs really ridiculous, and the uncertainty about costs completely unacceptable to me. And I've also come to a feeling about Kickstarters that the Kickstarter exclusives tend to be untested, unimportant for gameplay, and just thrown in there for bling, and not really, very rarely do I ever end up using that or caring about that. And if this doesn't describe you, then maybe my opinions aren't going to be that helpful to you. But I have found a real pattern that I'll buy a game and I'll love it, and then I'll go and get everything for it, like 10 different expansions, and all of a sudden it takes up this much space on the shelf, and I don't want the hassle of opening it. It's just all of the pleasure has gone. The pleasure peaks the moment you buy it and open the box and look at all this stuff you have. And then getting it down from the shelf, setting it up and playing becomes something that is suddenly not fun anymore. It used to be easy, you just take the box off the shelf and play it. With so much extra stuff, like these Kickstarters with like 5 boxes of minis, that makes it not playable for me. Like, I don't want to get that down. Okay, your mileage may vary. Okay, and then whether this will be a continuing series, as I said, this is probably a terrible idea and won't make me any friends. Probably doubly terrible to do it live where I haven't planned out everything I'm going to say. So we may not ever do this again. It's also not really my wheelhouse, and I would love to see someone else who is more focused on day-to-day Kickstarter board gaming and buys a lot of Kickstarter games. I'd love to see someone do more of a focus on, have more of their bias against saying no. And I think maybe you should remember, even if you throw out the paid money incentives for reviewing Kickstarters, and then you throw out all the incentives to keep good relationships with companies and get early access to games, you have to realize that when a board game content producer says, I'm going to back this game because I like it, you have to realize that a board game content creator has a hugely more significant drive to get games right away, the moment they come out. And so, whereas as a normal human being, you have the luxury of waiting till the game comes out, waiting till it hits retail, or waiting till the real reviews of the full games come out. The board game content creator there's a huge amount of competition that's driving them to get these games, get the previews early, and then get the finished copies early so that they can do the video where they unbox it and they show it to you before anyone else does. So your incentives are different. You do not have to buy into this get it right away. Are you really out of games? Have you really played every game that you own? That you're desperate to get this new game the moment it comes out a year from now? You can't wait a year and 2 months. You've got to have it a year and 1 day. Think about that. All right, so here we go. We finally made it to Star Realms. So let's actually talk about Star Realms just for a second, and then we'll go to the Kickstarter project page for Star Realms. Okay, so you see I've got Star Realms here. Actually, this is how I keep my Star Realms, in a box so I can take it with me. Actually, you don't need a box this big. You can use it half as big. And Star Realms is a deck builder, primarily 2-player head-to-head. And I love Star Realms. I bought it in 2014-15, right when it came out. I've played it hundreds of times. I taught it to my little niece who was 11 or 12 at the time. We played it a lot. And I love it. I think first of all, I love the art. It's very easy to learn. Here are the 2-player rules. There's just this pamphlet. That's the complete set of rules. It's not cooperative. It's head-to-head. There are rules for playing with more than 2 people. I've never seen more than 2 people play it. Some groups must play it, but I think it's really primarily a 2-player game. And very streamlined, very straightforward. Once you learn the rules, everything's on the cards. I love it. Now, I love it partly because it fills a niche, and the niche is a quick, portable, small, easy to learn, easy to set up game, maybe 45 minutes. And you can carry it with you in your backpack, break it out, play it, teach someone. Perfect for that niche, right? We like board gamers, we like to have different games for different groups of people and different occasions. Star Realms has come out with, over the years, many, many expansions with scenarios, with different kinds of cards, increasing the complexity, but keeping it fairly simple always. And if you want to buy Star Realms, you've got a huge set of things you can buy. Now, let us go to so you know my bias now. I love Star Realms. Okay. Now let's go to the Kickstarter project. This is not the first Kickstarter for Star Realms. I believe that Colony Wars, which I have here, was a Kickstarter that I backed at some point. Okay, so let's look at this project, which started today. They've already raised $200,000. Okay, now here you go. Here's the first thing to notice. $60. It's $60 for this pack. It's a bigger box, and it's a legacy game. Legacy. We'll talk about to what extent it's really a legacy, but here it is. But $60. Now let me show you how much it would cost you to buy Star Realms now from Amazon, the base box of Star Realms. There it is, $12. Okay, so let me just give you some bottom line right now. If you don't own Star Realms, I think it's insane for you to be buying it's not $60, it's $60. Shipping to the US is estimated at $15 to $25. So you're going to pay more than $100 for this. Maybe you'll pledge your $60 and you'll find out shipping is $30. We don't know. It arrives in a year, in 2023. So in a year, they'll tell you how much your shipping is. Okay. If you've never played Star Realms, go spend $12 and play base Star Realms and find someone to play it with. Because if you don't have someone to play it with, there's no point. And see if part of what's not fun about it is that you can just break it out at any time. You're just set it up very quick, ready to go, no commitment, play a game, play a couple games, take it with you in your backpack, etc. Before you spend that money, before you spend $100 to have delivered in 1 year this box. Okay, so what is this, some completely new game? No, it's basically Star Realms. Now, it's Star Realms with a legacy campaign for 2 players. And then after you finish the campaign, you could play with up to 6 players, which you never will. Now, what do you get in this $100 cost box? And you got to add another $20 if you want this infinite replay tier, which we'll talk about. So what do you get for $100? A beautiful 22 by 11 game board. Now, here's the game board. Let's see if can we zoom in on this? Okay. What is this game board? It's this. It's a place to put your 5 cards so that you have to bring this board with you. If you want to use this thing, you put it out and it's got a space for your cards. And then a lot of art around it to distract you. Totally pointless. Pointless, silly, annoyance, and just goes with this theme that we're taking this game that used to be portable and we're making it not portable. Obviously, you don't have to use the game board, but I'm just saying this is the kind of thing we get in these Kickstarters. Okay, some scoring things, those are fine. Those are useful. You could make them yourself or use any other way of keeping score. Okay, and then there's a lot of hype. There's a full video here, animated video to get you excited about this amazing world, which is totally...
In Rise of Empire, 2 players will wage war as either the
anything. All of this story about fighters and
at that time,
emergency stuff. This is all bullshit. Has nothing
at the end of the campaign.
Not relevant at all. Just stuff to get you excited. Okay, exclusive stretch goals are these cards. So an extra card that you won't notice in your 200 cards that make no difference. I happen to love the art of Star Realms, but do you need 4 extra cards? Okay, now we should talk about the legacy elements of this game. And let's talk a little bit. We're just chatting here. We're just wasting time talking as if you were talking to your friend. All right, so I want to talk to you about legacy games and where this fits in. I am a huge fan of legacy games. I think the best game ever made, the best 2 games ever made, were the 2 pandemic legacy games, which you could probably pick up now for about $70. Those are huge reworkings of a base game. Pandemic Legacy 1 and 2, and now there's 3, are mammoth works of real accomplishments in creating very sophisticated legacy games where huge things change over the course of the story and campaign, and they're complete, full, real experiences. And Risk Legacy, which was the game that started all this, is a huge accomplishment in game design in terms of creating a whole new game, really completely changing the way the game plays and the experience, and creating moments that you really look back on and say, wow, remember when that happened? Remember when we opened that box and we're so surprised by this component? That's not what's happening here in this legacy Rise of Empire, this legacy Star Realms. The legacy stuff looks exceedingly thin. So I've watched some of the paid previews, and it's like the first 4 out of 12 campaigns. It's a little card. It's got like 1 paragraph of throwaway narrative, and then the rule change for this game is everyone gets to draw an extra card at the beginning of their turn. And the stickers are, every card is made up of these symbols of having different amounts of symbols of coins you get, defense you get, victory points you get. Look at these stickers. I mean, this is very thin gruel for a legacy game. And you can see just by the way this whole game is pitched that after you play it, you can use these cards with your regular Star Realms set. And once you finish this, the replay kit, which is $20, is basically every card pre-stickered in every combination of ways. So it's really, really a thin legacy. So even someone who loves legacy, who's willing to pay a pretty high premium for, I don't need that much in the legacy game, I really think it feels a bit like an attempt to cash in on the legacy stuff. You do get to technically put stickers, but boy, you're talking about a deck of 200 cards. Each card has a different set of different configuration of symbols, and you buy these stickers and you're adding a symbol to a card to make it a little more powerful. That is pretty thin stuff. And even if there are extra hidden surprises in the box, to me, this feels like a real disappointment in terms of getting a legacy experience. Here's the scenario cards. Here's scenario number 2. You can see there's the sentence of the story, and then at the start of each player's turn, they may draw a card, then discard a card. Does that sound like an amazing game-changing event? And if you put all your stickers on, you win. I mean, look, they may add a lot of stuff. And here are the sticker cards that you add to your cards. Does that excite you? I'm assuming you know something about Star Realms. Boy, it is really pretty thin. Now, with all that said, if you're a Star Realms superfan and you are currently playing Star Realms with someone, you're married to someone and the two of you love playing Star Realms, by all means, if it's worth $100 to get another 12 hours of a fun legacy campaign that you play game after game and build up your stuff, I'm not trying to tell you what I'm not trying to tell you what to do with your money. I'm just giving you some reasons why to obey your heart and not back it if your heart tells you I don't need this. Now, everything I'm saying here, complaining about the thin legacy element, complaining about spending $100 on Star Realms, remember, I'm not even suggesting you don't buy this. I'm telling you, do you really need to lay out $100, pay $20, $30, an unknown amount in shipping, and commit to that now a year ahead of time? No, I'm merely suggesting you obey the voice at the back of your head saying, maybe I could wait till this hits retail and comes down to a $30 game. Maybe I don't need those 4 special cards that I'll never even notice for an extra $70. All right. So that's my bot. Oh, here are all these paid Kickstarter previews and paid playthroughs from all of our favorite people. There's your shipping. If you're in the US, $15 to $25 estimate. Remember, the way Kickstarter works is you pay now, and then you find out what your actual shipping is when it ships in a year. And the moment they get their funding, all of the incentive to spend money and time on the game is gone, and their incentive to keep shipping costs low is gone, whatever. Canada, $25 to $35. Rest of the world, $50 to $90. Okay, that's insanity. Now, let's also look at Kickstarter exclusives. This is the reason to do it now, rather than wait till it hits retail and is cheaper with real reviews being published. The only reason is if it won't come to retail, which this is absolutely going to come to retail, or if you get some Kickstarter exclusives. In this case, the Kickstarter exclusives are a couple cards that I think are really silly. And here's them mentioning that, yeah, well, we are going to release this Kickstarter exclusive stuff. We'll find a way to get it in, to sell it, repackage it, put it in another Kickstarter. And just as a general sense, if a game is great, it's going to either come back to Kickstarter over and over again, or it'll hit retail. There are no amazing games that never come back. So just calm down about needing to back it right away. All right. So there you have it. I've given my whole spiel on why you shouldn't kickstart Star Realms Rise of Empire, or at least why you should listen to the voice in your head or the voice in the other room of your spouse telling you you really don't need to lay out $100 for a game that's going to come out in a year, when in that year a bunch of better games that you're going to like more are going to come out. And my advice is absolutely try Star Realms. Absolutely. For $12, $20 at your local game store, go down, buy Star Realms, learn it, have it as a game you can quickly take out for a 2-player game, portable. You don't have to worry about sorting huge numbers of cards in a box. You don't have to worry about finding someone who will play 12 games in a row with you. And then if you love Star Realms and you find someone else who loves to play it with you, maybe it's worth $100 to get the legacy game, but you better hope you're still friends with them in a year and you still want to play Star Realms, because you're not going to get it for a year. Bottom line, very bad choice as your first Star Realms purchase. Go buy the standalone first. All right, and I think that's about all I have to say on this. I don't know if this was a terrible idea. I hope I haven't stepped on too many toes in the board game content creators world. Again, I'm not criticizing them for doing paid previews or any of that. I just think you should have a healthy dose of skepticism when it comes to backing Kickstarters, and really ask yourself if you're backing it for that dopamine rush that comes in the moment you click purchase, and that in the weeks to follow you don't feel that little depression when your money is gone and you realize you're not so excited about it anymore. All right, I think we only had 4 or 5 people join for this video, which might be all for the best. But does anyone want to talk about this, have different opinions than I do on this? I mean, if you've got money to burn, by all means, back everything. Do what Alex at Board Game Co. says. Think of these as little presents you buy yourself a year in advance, and so they're surprise presents. Hey, if you've got money to burn, go for it. Kickstart everything and just have it arrive in the mail as a little surprise, assuming you've got the shelf space for it. Okay, so Jonathan Warner, my old detective partner, says, back to the idea of positive previews, probably easier to just scrap preview recording if not enjoying a game, then lean into the disliking enough to be funny, neutral. Neutral or slight dislike is probably not the most entertaining content. Yeah, I think that's true. You cannot you cannot find, if there's a Kickstarter, think about the other thing is that here's the other thing that's slightly troublesome about these Kickstarter previews. There can't be such a thing as a negative Kickstarter preview. It can't exist. The way the companies have set it up, they will only pay people, and all of the incentive for paying people is to make positive previews, which look a lot like reviews. Okay, so if a company has lots of money, they're going to be able to pay people to produce videos praising these games. And even if they weren't paying money, the channels will be happy to get early access to a brand new game. So you have to be on the lookout for, you have to start using some meta strategies like, oh, why did only 5 channels produce paid Kickstarter previews, and why are they like the second tier channels? What does that tell me? Is it that, unfortunately, it's a little hard to tell whether it means that the top tier channels didn't like it, so they didn't produce the previews, or the company didn't have enough money to buy the Kickstarter previews. That's the other part about this whole realm that is troublesome, which is that if you're a big company with lots of money and a big advertising budget, you will buy yourself videos on the top board game channels. With the money, you can buy yourself a paid Kickstarter preview on Dice Tower, Quackalope, etc. You purchase that. You purchase that coverage and getting the videos out in front of people. And that happens whether the game is good or not, although you could try to detect when you watch these videos, did they really love it, or did they not love it as much as they did some other games? The only unfortunate thing is that if you're a small company, then all of these channels who are getting paid previews, well, the unpaid stuff really has to go to the bottom of the queue. They've got to cover the games that are paying their rent. And I do think it would be nice if these board game channels made a little bit more of a deliberate effort to say, look, we're going to separate things into 2 tiers. They're going to be the companies rolling in money. We're going to charge them for paid previews. And then they're going to be the companies, if they're not rolling in money, we're going to give them the same attention. We're going to put them as high in the queue of doing their previews unpaid because we don't expect them to pay it. And I think there are a couple channels to do that. I've heard Jesse at Quackalope talk about giving some attention to the companies that aren't paying for previews that can't afford it. And I think that's important. I'd like to see some more of that, so that at least it wouldn't be the case that the paid companies get all the coverage and the companies that can't afford to pay don't. There are other ways you could try to fix this system. And that might be these companies releasing more Tabletop Simulator early access so that anyone could get early access, or doing more early access at conventions, giving anyone at a convention the ability to get the same content and play the same game they would if they got this early access Kickstarter. But there's no good solution to this. Maybe if we get a board game crash, it'll go away. Any other comments from anyone else in the channel, especially if you disagree with me about Star Realms or about Kickstarter in general? Otherwise, we'll wrap it up. Let me know if you think I should do more of these. I don't know. It doesn't feel good to say bad things about something. It doesn't feel good to say that that I don't think you should buy something. And I'm not really saying I don't think you should buy it. I'm just saying, here's the voice agreeing with the voice at the back of your head telling you shouldn't buy it. And here's at least one voice in the swarm of videos telling you how great it is, maybe you should have one to counterbalance that tells you just relax. You don't need it. You don't need to pay for something a year ahead of time that might not be so good. Wait till you can look at it. Jonathan Warner says, side topic, have you seen any of the Kick Scammers series on the Channel Slopes Game Room? Not board game specific, more focused on bad faith crowdfunding. Watching them might make you feel less inclined to back in general. I don't think I have. I have seen a bunch of videos, including some board game channels that take a look at other crowdfunding of junk, and they are somewhat amusing. There are some ridiculous things on Kickstarter and Indiegogo and now GameFound. There are some ridiculous things being backed that are clearly never going to come to fruition. And occasionally you can see these postmortems about projects that failed to deliver. The good news about backing these board games on Kickstarter, especially by these big companies, is it's all a bit of a scam in terms of needing money to kickstart it. This game's coming out, it's coming to retail. So at least you know you are going to get what you paid for. It could be delayed a year, the shipping costs could triple, but they will eventually bring it to market. So at least there's that you don't have to worry about. Getting back, one last comment about the channels that are doing these Kickstarter paid previews. I mean, I think I've already said it, but I want to emphasize, I want to make clear, I'm not saying that they're presenting their opinions in bad faith. And not presenting their opinions, but I do think there's a whole bunch of incentives that distort things. And there's a famous saying about how it's hard to convince a man of a fact when his job requires him to not believe it. Something like that. I've mangled it, but basically, you can't be objective if you know that when you say bad things that the company's not gonna want to use you again and send you stuff again. And there's just a whole bunch of reasons why internally we become biased. When I play games on this channel, I don't take any copies or paid or anything, but the moment you even talk to the designer or the company, the moment you exchange one little Twitter comment, you can feel it. You can feel that you're like, you just pause a little before you say something negative. Jonathan says, side topic, what was my least favorite campaign you backed? Unless you feel that answering that is being too negative. No, I'm happy to answer that, but I get rid of games. I trade and sell games, so it's a little hard for me to remember the ones I bought and got rid of. But I backed one of the zombie sides and played it and decided I didn't want it and got rid of it. I'll give you a good example. This wasn't a Kickstarter, but related to zombie side. There's a game called Last Night on Earth. It's a zombie game. And I played it with a couple of friends. It's a very light-hearted game, but I thought it was fun. Like, the game group I played it with enjoyed it. And I have a bad habit, like many of you. You play a game, if it really goes over well with the group, you're suddenly like, let me get all of it. Let me get all of the expansions. And that's kind of what the Kickstarter ties into, that desire to have all these things and all these extra tiers that are increasingly less efficient. And there's a case where I got everything for it and got some of it painted. And the moment I had those 4 boxes, I didn't ever want to open that thing up again. 4 boxes with different rules for different expansions. It's very hard for me to think of a Kickstarter all-in thing that I was happy with. It's just too much stuff. And maybe that has something to do with living in a small place and not wanting to fill the whole house up with boxes. of games I don't play. The more minis, the harder it is to get off the shelf and play. Anything else? It seems like this was another conversation with Jonathan, just Jonathan and I having a private conversation. Jonathan, have you kickstarted stuff that you've been happy with or unhappy with? Maybe while this is off screen, I can find that list of oh, I see. That was the wrong page. There's all of our Kickstarter Star Realms from today. Tantrum House, Rise of Empire, the new Legacy Games, Board Game Co. with Alex, Rise of an Empire review. Oh, that says review. Star Realms Legacy, better than the original. That's Quackalope. There's the Dice Tower preview. Our Family Plays Games preview. Jonathan says, not really, more with tracking. Oops. Tracking down some of the out-of-print stuff and gambling on how much fun it will be. Yeah, I guess Jonathan and I do more of the buying. But actually, that's a good point. If you think about it from a money perspective, think about, I hear people say like, I have to buy this on Kickstarter because if I don't back it now, when it comes out in a year, I won't be able to get these Kickstarter exclusives. So I want you to think about this for a second from a net cost perspective. Let's say you don't back this thing on Kickstarter, Star Realms and Rise of Empire, the Kickstarter version. And in a year and 6 months, it comes out and the retail version comes out, and those 5 cards that are in the Kickstarter exclusive, or 10 cards, whatever, you decide, I really want those cards. It's buggy. I'm staying awake at night. I can't sleep because I don't have those 10 special cards, which cannot be essential for the game. Otherwise, they wouldn't sell it. Anyway, whatever. When that happens with these Kickstarters, you could still get your Kickstarter. You just buy it on the third market. You buy it on third-party market, the aftermarket stuff, and you pay a little more. Let's say you pay an extra $50 to get it over what you would have paid now. So a year and a half from now, you're going to pay an extra $50 to get that Kickstarter. And then for that year and a half or year that you've been waiting, you've had that money in your bank and you've paid the extra $50 or $100, let's say it costs you double. Think about that extra $100 you bought to be able to buy it after it funds, after it ships. Think about how many times you would have to be right about pre-backing a Kickstarter to make up for that $100. In other words, if half of the Kickstarters you back you regret, you're better off not backing any of them and just buying the good ones on the aftermarket and paying the markup. And I think that's where I am now. If it's that good, it'll be reprinted, or if I really need it, instead of backing these 10 games as shot in the dark roll of the dice since I can't see them and the reviews aren't out and the games aren't finished, I'll just wait till other people are getting them. And then instead of backing 10 and liking one, I'll wait for them all to come out and pay a little extra to get it aftermarket from someone else who decided they don't want it, or from all the people who are basically scalping, buying a bunch of them and reselling for profit. It seems that is the smarter way to go. All right. I guess we should end it here. We'll see if this video. It wasn't really a fun video to make, but we'll see if we want to do this again. If you have games that you need talking out of, let me know. Jonathan Warner says, if there's a game that has a digital demo, I would try to convince your group to try that digital version. I think that's a good idea. If you occasionally, these games do have a tabletop simulator mod that's early access that is open to everyone before you back it. Now that would be a great idea. Play that, and if you love that, then back it. That's a great idea. I think if you can actually play the game, or maybe if you go and do a demo at a convention or whatever, and you actually play the prototype and you actually love it, then that might be a reason to kickstart it. But I've given you other reasons why I think this is a bad way to play Star Realms. Certainly a bad first choice to play Star Realms, but I also think it's contrary to the niche that Star Realms fits, and the legacy stuff does not seem very interesting, and the cost seems wildly out of whack for what it is. Get yourself Pandemic Legacy. If you want a deck builder legacy game, you might try Eon's End Legacy, the first one. You could get that for $75. You could buy it in a store right now, and that's got some real interesting legacy elements. All right, let's sign off here. Thanks for joining me. You can let me know if you never want to see one of these again. Probably I'll leave this up and not delete it, but yeah, thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.